Before we begin, if you're enjoying these true stories from law enforcement, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more of these unsettling accounts from the forgotten corners of America. And I'm curious, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location in the comments below. Now, let's get into this story from the Navajo Nation. My name is Marcus Zoe, and before I tell you this story, I served as a Navajo tribal police officer for over 15 years. I have never disclosed this to the public before. It's not because anyone told me to keep quiet, but because I knew for sure that no one would believe me. I'm not even sure if I believe it myself anymore. But as I get older, I feel the need to tell someone, to put it into words, before I forget this memory completely, or before I forget it completely. It was September of 1988, and I was working patrol out of the Kayenta district, covering the northern part of the Navajo Nation near Monument Valley. If you've never been there, it's hard to describe. Red sand, red rocks, blue sky that goes on forever. The land looks like it was carved by giants and left for us to wonder at. I'd grown up not far from there, in a small community near Window Rock. And even after 34 years, the landscape still took my breath away. I'd been on the force for 8 years by then. Before that, I'd done 2 tours in Vietnam, came back in '73 with a head full of nightmares and a need to do something useful with my life. Policing the nation felt right. Our people needed officers who understood the culture, who spoke the language, who knew that sometimes the old ways and the new laws didn't quite fit together. I tried to be that bridge. That September evening, I was on a routine patrol, driving the back roads between Kayenta and the Utah border. The sun was going down, painting the mesas in shades of orange and purple. I had my window down, enjoying the cool air that comes when the desert lets go of the day's heat. My radio was quiet, just occasional chatter from dispatch, nothing urgent. It was the kind of shift where you could think, where the silence felt like a companion rather than an absence. I was about 15 miles from the nearest paved road when I saw it. A building, a chapter house from the look of it. Single-story, cinder block construction, flat roof. The kind of community center you'd find in any of the 100-plus chapters across the nation. There was a parking lot with a few trucks, lights on inside, and smoke coming from a stovepipe chimney. I slowed down, confused. I knew this area. I'd driven this road dozens of times, and there had never been a building here. I checked my map, the paper one I kept on the passenger seat. Nothing. I checked the patrol area guide. Nothing. This location was supposed to be empty land, BIA grazing lease, no structures. But there it was, solid and real, with people inside. I pulled into the lot and parked next to an old Ford pickup that looked like it was from the 50s, which was strange because people on the res drove old vehicles, sure, but this one looked brand new. No rust, no dents, fresh paint, like it had just rolled off the lot. I got out of my unit and approached the building. The front door was propped open, and I could hear voices inside, speaking Navajo, a meeting of some kind. I stepped onto the porch and knocked on the door frame. "Yati," I called out. "Hello?" The voices stopped. I stepped inside and found myself in a large meeting room. About 20 people were seated in folding chairs arranged in a circle. At the front, behind a wooden table, sat 3 elders. Men in their 60s or 70s, wearing wool suits and bolo ties, their hair pulled back in traditional tsiyil. They were staring at me. Everyone was staring at me. "Ya'ati," I said again. "I'm Officer Marcus Zoe, Navajo Tribal Police, Kayenta District. I'm sorry to interrupt. I saw this building and I don't have it on my maps. Can someone tell me what chapter this is?" Silence. The people exchanged glances. Some of the women pulled their shawls tighter around their shoulders. A child in the back started crying and was quickly hushed. One of the elders at the front table stood slowly. He was tall, thin, with deep lines carved into his face and eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 years of sorrow. "Tribal police," he repeated, his voice careful. "From Kayenta." "Yes, sir." "What year do you come from?" The question didn't register at first. "I'm sorry?" "The year." "What year is it where you come from?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "It's 1988, sir. September 15th, 1988. The room erupted. People started talking all at once, some standing, some backing away from me. The elder at the table raised his hand, and slowly the noise subsided. "1988, he said quietly. He looked at the other two elders, then back at me. "Son, I need you to stay calm. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to understand." "Sir, I don't—" "This is the Tsebitai chapter house. The year is 1934. You've come a long way, Officer Tso. We've been expecting you." I actually laughed. I'm not proud of it, but I did. 1934? That's not possible. This building wasn't here an hour ago. I've driven this road. "This building has been here since 1932, the elder interrupted. "But it doesn't always stay in the same time it moves. Or perhaps time moves around it. We don't fully understand how it works, but we know that sometimes people from other times find their way here, and we know that an officer would come, a Navajo police officer from the future. We've known for 2 years. How? How could you possibly know that?" The elder gestured to a young woman sitting near the wall. She stood and brought over a piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. She handed it to me carefully, like it might crumble. It was a drawing, simple, done in pencil, but unmistakable. A man in a uniform that looked like mine, standing in front of a vehicle that looked like my patrol unit. Below the drawing, in neat handwriting, were the words, "The officer from the future. He will come in September, when the corn is ready. He will be confused. Help him understand." "Who drew this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You did," the elder said. "Or you will. We found it here, in this chapter house, in 1932 when we first opened the building. It was waiting for us." I looked at the drawing again. The style was like mine. I'd always been a doodler, filling the margins of my notebooks with sketches, but I hadn't drawn this, not yet. "I need to leave," I said. "I need to get back to my vehicle and radio for help." "You can try," the elder said. "But the door doesn't always lead back to where you came from." I didn't listen. I turned and walked out of the chapter house, back into the parking lot. My patrol unit was still there, right where I'd left it. I got in, grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, Officer Tso. I need a location check. Can you confirm my GPS coordinates?" Static, then a voice, but not dispatch. A man's voice speaking Navajo, formal and old-fashioned. "The machine won't help you, nephew. The chapter house exists outside the signal, outside all signals." I dropped the radio and got out of the car. The sun had set while I was inside, but the sky was wrong. Too many stars, too bright. No light pollution from Kayenta or Page or any of the towns I should have been able to see on the horizon. I walked back toward the chapter house, but stopped at the door. Through the window, I could see the meeting was still going on. The same people, the same elders. But now they were discussing something else. I could hear snippets. The livestock reduction program. Washington says we have too many sheep. They don't understand. The sheep are everything. Our way of life. If we resist, they'll send soldiers, like before, like the Long Walk. I knew this history, the livestock reduction of the 1930s, when the federal government forced Navajo families to kill their sheep and goats supposedly to prevent overgrazing, but really destroying the economic foundation of the nation. It was one of the great traumas, second only to the Long Walk itself. I was listening to it happen in real time. I pushed open the door and stepped back inside. The room fell silent again. "I believe you," I said. "I don't understand it, but I believe you. Now please, tell me how to get home." The elder who had spoken before, whose name I later learned was Howard Yazzie, nodded slowly. "The door," he said. "It leads to different times. When you came in, it was connected to your 1988, but it shifts. The chapter house is wounded, I suppose you could say. Wounded in time. It was built on a place of great sorrow, and that sorrow tore something. A hole in the fabric of years. What kind of sorrow?" Howard's face darkened. "This is where they gathered the people in 1864. For the Long Walk. Thousands of Navajo, forced at gunpoint to march to Bosque Redondo. Many died here before the walk even began. Children. Elders, the weak and the sick. The land remembers. The land always remembers." I felt sick. I'd known the history, of course. Every Navajo child learned about the Long Walk, but I hadn't known this specific location had been a gathering point. It wasn't in any of the books. "So, this chapter house," I said slowly, "it's built on what? A wound in time? The old people would say the earth is crying here, crying so hard that the tears flow backward and forward, mixing the years together. The chapter house sits in those tears. Sometimes it's in one year, sometimes another, and sometimes people slip through. How do I slip back?" Howard shook his head. "We don't know. People have come through before, a soldier from 1918, still in his army uniform, a woman from 1956 looking for her children. They all eventually found their way back, but none of them could explain how. The door just opened to the right time. How long did it take? The soldier was here for 3 days. The woman almost a month. A month, I thought of my wife, Ellen, at home in Kayenta with our 2 kids. I thought of my shift sergeant wondering where I was. I thought of the patrol unit outside, useless. I can't wait a month. I have a family, a job. People will be looking for me." "Time doesn't work the same way here," Howard said. "The soldier was with us for 3 days. When he went back to 1918, only an hour had passed. The woman was here for a month, but in 1956, she'd been gone for a single night. That was something, at least. Maybe I could find my way back before anyone noticed I was missing." "What do I do until then?" I asked. Howard almost smiled. "You do what you were meant to do. You listen. You learn. You witness. The chapter house brought you here for a reason, Officer Tso. Maybe that reason is to understand your people's history in a way no book could ever teach you." I spent that night in the chapter house, sleeping on a cot in the back room, while the 1934 meeting continued. I could hear them talking late into the night, debating how to respond to the livestock reduction orders, how to protect their families without provoking the government into another forced relocation. Their fear was real, immediate. This wasn't history to them. This was survival. In the morning, I woke to silence. The meeting room was empty. The chairs folded and stacked against the wall. I walked to the front door and opened it. The parking lot was different. No trucks, no vehicles at all. Just a single horse tied to a post, and beyond the parking lot, the landscape had changed. The mesas were the same, but there were more trees, more grass. The land looked healthier, less eroded, and there were people approaching. Men on horseback, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Not traditional Navajo, not modern American, something in between. One of them called out to me in Navajo, but the dialect was old, formal. I understood most of it. "You there, at the meeting house. State your clan and your business." I raised my hand slowly. "I am Marcus Zoe, born for Towering House Clan, born to Bitter Water Clan. I'm a visitor here, I mean no harm." The men exchanged glances. One of them rode closer, studying my uniform, my badge. "What kind of clothing is this? What do these symbols mean?" "I'm a police officer, a peacekeeper, from another time." The man's eyes widened. "You're the one from the story, the future warrior who walks through the crying place." "What year is this?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "The year the Bilagana call 1962. We call it the year the yellow rocks brought sickness. The height of the uranium mining boom. When companies had come to the Navajo Nation, hired Navajo workers to dig radioactive ore without any protection, without any warning of the dangers. Thousands had gotten sick. Hundreds had died. Many were still dying when I became an officer. I was standing in the middle of another tragedy, another wound in my people's history. "The chapter house," I said. "It's still here?" The man nodded. "It's always here. It never left, but it's not always now." He extended his hand to help me onto his horse. "Come. The council will want to speak with you. They've been waiting." Waiting? How could they know I was coming? The man smiled sadly. "Because you already came, Officer Zoe, 28 years ago. You came to the 1934 council and told them everything. Told them about the future, about the sickness from the yellow rocks, about the struggles to come. They wrote it all down, and they've been waiting to meet you ever since." I climbed onto the horse, my mind reeling. I'd gone from 1988 to 1934 to 1962. The chapter house was moving through time, or I was, and somehow I was leaving footprints in every era I visited. I was becoming a legend, a story that my own people told to each other across the decades. But I still didn't know how to get home, and as we rode toward whatever waited for me in 1962, I realized something that made my blood run cold. If I had already visited 1934 and told them about the future, that meant I would go back to 1934 again, which meant I hadn't escaped yet, which meant somewhere ahead of me, in my personal timeline, I was going to return to that council meeting and give them the information they already had. I was caught in a loop made of my people's trauma, cycling through the years, carrying me with it. And I had no idea how many more turns of the wheel I'd have to endure before I found my way out. The chapter house stood behind me, quiet and patient. It had all the time in the world, and apparently so did I. The ride to the 1962 council took about an hour. The men who'd found me were uranium miners, I learned, working the claims near Cove and Red Valley. They spoke quietly about their work, about the yellow ore they pulled from the ground, about the good wages that let them support their families. None of them mentioned being sick, but I could see it in their faces. The pallor, the thinness, the way one of them coughed into his sleeve and tried to hide the blood. I knew what was coming for them. Lung cancer, kidney failure, birth defects in their children. The federal government and the mining companies knew the dangers of radiation exposure, but they never told the Navajo workers, never provided masks or ventilation or protective equipment. Just let them dig their own graves, one shovelful of radioactive ore at a time. And here I was, a visitor from the future, with the knowledge that could save them. The question was whether I should share it, and whether it would make any difference if I did. The chapter house looked the same from the outside. Same cinder block construction, same flat roof, same parking lot. But there were more vehicles now, newer models from the late 50s and early 60s, and there were more people, gathered in clusters, talking urgently. A woman approached as I dismounted. She was maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She wore a nurse's uniform under a heavy coat. "You're the one," she said, "the officer from the future. Howard Yazzie told us about you." "Howard? He's still alive?" "He passed in 1958, but he made sure we knew. He made sure every chapter house on the nation knew the story. The officer who walks through time, who brings warnings from the future." She studied my face. "You look exactly like the drawing." "The drawing I supposedly made?" "The drawing you will make. Time is strange here, Officer So. You'll get used to it." She extended her hand. "I'm Annie Benally. I'm a nurse at the Shiprock Hospital. I also serve on the Tribal Health Committee." "Then you know about the uranium, about what it's doing to the miners." Her expression hardened. "I know. I've watched 17 men die in the past 2 years. Good men, strong men who went into the mines healthy and came out coughing blood. The companies say it's not related. The government says there's no proof. There is proof. There will be proof. Studies, investigations, lawsuits, but it takes decades. Too many people die before anyone admits the truth." Annie nodded slowly. "Howard told us you'd say that. He told us you'd know things about our future, things that could help us or hurt us depending on how we use them." "What else did he tell you?" "That we shouldn't ask too many questions, that some knowledge is a burden, that you carry enough burdens already." She gestured toward the chapter house. "The council is waiting. They have questions, but I'll make sure they respect Howard's wishes." Inside, the meeting room was fuller than it had been in 1934. Maybe 50 people, crowded onto chairs and benches and standing along the walls. At the front table sat 3 council members, 2 men and a woman, all wearing the formal attire of tribal officials. The woman at the center spoke first. "Officer Tso, thank you for coming. I'm not sure I had a choice. None of us do, when the chapter house calls." She introduced herself as Helen Watchman, chapter president. "We've read Howard's accounts of your 1934 visit. We've studied the warnings you gave about the livestock reduction, about the poverty and displacement that would follow. Everything you predicted came true." "I didn't predict it, I just knew history. To us, it was prophecy. And now you're here, in our time, and we need to know, what comes next? What should we prepare for?" I looked around the room at the faces watching me. Miners with radiation poisoning, families who'd lost everything in the livestock reduction and were just starting to rebuild children who didn't know yet that their futures had been poisoned along with their father's lungs. What could I tell them? That the uranium contamination would take decades to acknowledge? That compensation wouldn't come until most of the victims were dead? That their land would be left scarred and toxic, unfit for the sheep and crops that had sustained their ancestors? "The mines are killing you," I said finally. "The yellow ore is radioactive. Exposure causes cancer, lung disease, kidney failure. The companies know, but they won't admit it. You need to document everything. Medical records, work histories, exposure levels. Take photographs. Write down names and dates. Because someday there will be investigations, and the only way to get justice is to have proof." The room was silent. Annie Benally was writing furiously in a notebook. "What about the land?" one of the miners asked. "Will it recover? Some of it. Eventually. But there are places that will be contaminated for generations. The tailings piles, the abandoned mines. Keep your children away from them. Keep your animals away." "The money," another man said. "The mining wages. It's the only work we have. Are you saying we should quit?" I hesitated. This was the impossible part, the moral trap I couldn't escape. I'm saying you should know the risks. I'm saying the companies should provide protection, and they won't unless you demand it, I'm saying. I trailed off, because what I was really saying was that they should choose between slow death and immediate poverty, and that wasn't a choice anyone should have to make. Helen Watchman raised her hand, and the questions stopped. We understand, Officer So. You've given us what you can. We won't ask you to carry more than that. I spent 3 days in 1962, though it felt longer. Annie Benally took me to the hospital in Shiprock, showed me the wards full of dying miners, introduced me to the doctors who were trying to document what the government denied. I told them what I knew about radiation sickness, about the latency periods, about the studies that would eventually prove the connection. I don't know if it helped. I hope it did. On the third night, I returned to the chapter house alone. The building was quiet, the parking lot empty. I walked inside, half expecting to find another council meeting in another time. Instead, the room was dark and silent. I sat down in one of the folding chairs and waited. I didn't know what else to do. An hour passed, maybe 2. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was Annie carrying a lantern. "The door is changing," she said. "I can feel it. The chapter house is getting ready to move you again." "Where? When?" "I don't know. But I wanted to give you this before you go." She handed me a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a leather journal, worn but well kept. It's Howard Yazzi's, his account of your 1934 visit, plus everything he learned about the chapter house over the years. He wanted you to have it. I opened the journal and saw Howard's careful handwriting, page after page of observations and theories. He'd dedicated years to understanding the temporal anomaly, and now he was passing that knowledge to me. "Thank you," I said. "I'll take care of it." "One more thing." Annie's voice was hesitant. "Howard wrote something at the end, a warning. He said I should tell you, but only when you were ready to leave." "What warning?" "He said the chapter house doesn't just move you through time. It moves you toward something, a destination, an event. He said everyone who passes through eventually reaches the same place." She paused. The beginning. The beginning of what? Of the wound. The original trauma that tore time apart here. Howard believed that to escape the chapter house you have to witness it. You have to go all the way back to 1864, to the Long Walk, and see what happened with your own eyes. I felt cold despite the warm night air. I don't want to see that. No one would. But Howard thought it was the only way. The chapter house is crying, he wrote, and the only way to stop the tears is to acknowledge the grief. Before I could respond, I felt it. A shift in the air, a change in pressure. The walls of the chapter house seemed to shimmer, and the darkness outside the windows deepened. "It's happening," Annie said. "Go to the door, quickly." I grabbed the journal and ran to the front entrance. When I opened the door, the parking lot was gone. In its place was a dirt path, a few wooden structures, and a crowd of people unlike any I'd seen before. They were Navajo, but dressed in the old way, in woven blankets and deerskin women with their hair in traditional buns, men carrying tools and weapons, and they were all moving in the same direction, driven by soldiers on horseback, blue uniformed soldiers. Cavalry. I was in 1864. The long walk was beginning. I stepped back inside and slammed the door, my heart pounding. Not yet. I wasn't ready for this. I couldn't watch my ancestors be marched to their deaths. But when I turned around, the chapter house was different again. Different furniture, different arrangement. A calendar on the wall said 1978. The door had moved me forward instead of backward. I was in the chapter house of 1978, and I could hear an argument happening in the next room. I approached slowly, trying to calm my breathing. Through the doorway, I saw a council meeting in progress, but this one was heated. Angry people were on their feet, shouting, "The government has no right to tell us how to manage our land. They have the power, whether they have the right or not. We have to work within the system. The system is designed to destroy us. We need to fight. Fighting got us the long walk. Is that what you want? Another forced march?" I recognized the argument. This was 1978, the era of Red Power and the American Indian Movement. Tribes across the country were demanding sovereignty, self-determination, an end to federal paternalism. On the Navajo Nation, the debate was fierce. Work within the system or burn it down. A woman at the front table saw me standing in the doorway. Her eyes went wide. "It's him," she said, and the room fell silent. The officer from the timeline, Howard's prophecy. Suddenly, everyone was staring at me again, but this time the reactions were mixed. Some faces showed awe, others suspicion. A young man in a red headband pushed forward. "So, you're the one, the cop who walks through time." He said the word cop like it was a curse. "You know what cops mean to us? Cops enforce their laws. Their rules, you're a tool of the colonizer, badge or no badge." "I'm Navajo," I said quietly. "Same as you. Then why do you wear their uniform? Why do you carry their gun?" "Because I want to protect our people, our way." "By enforcing their way? By putting natives in their jails?" I didn't have an answer that would satisfy him. He wasn't wrong, not entirely. The tension between tribal sovereignty and federal law enforcement was real, and I lived it every day. I believed in what I did, but I also knew the system I served was built on foundations that had tried to destroy us. The chapter president, an older man with gray braids and a calm voice, intervened. "That's enough, Leonard. The officer is here for a reason the chapter house brought him, just like Howard said it would." "Howard was an old fool who believed in ghosts and magic," Leonard said. "Howard predicted the uranium sickness 20 years before it happened. He predicted the relocation, the poverty, the cultural destruction. Everything he said came true because this man told him it would." The president looked at me. "What do you have to tell us, Officer Tso? What's waiting in our future?" I thought about what to say. In 1988, the sovereignty movement had made real gains. Tribal courts had more authority. The Indian Self-Determination Act had given nations more control over federal programs. But there were still struggles ahead, still battles over water rights and sacred lands and jurisdiction. "You win," I said finally. "Not everything, not all at once, but you win more than you lose. Sovereignty gets stronger. Tribal courts get more power. It takes time, and it takes fighting within the system and outside it, but things get better." Leonard snorted. "Things get better? That's your prophecy? Things get better?" "Yes. Slowly, painfully, with setbacks and compromises, but better. The nation survives. The culture survives. The language survives. In 1988, we're still here. We're still Navajo." The room was quiet. I could see people weighing my words, some reassured, others skeptical. The president nodded slowly. "Thank you, Officer Tso. I know that's not the kind of prophecy people want. They want certainty, victory, an end to struggle. But maybe the truth is better. Maybe knowing we survive is enough." "It has to be," I said, "because it's all I can give you." I stayed in 1978 for 2 days. I talked with the council members, with activists like Leonard, who challenged everything I believed about my work, with elders who remembered the old ways and worried they were being forgotten. I learned more about my people's recent history in those 2 days than I had in years of living through it. On the second night, I went to the chapter house alone and opened Howard's journal. I read his theories about the temporal wound, about how trauma could tear holes in time, and I read his final entry written just before he died in 1958. The officer will resist going back to 1864. Everyone does. The long walk is our greatest wound, and no one wants to witness it. But he must. The chapter house demands a witness, someone to see the suffering, to acknowledge it, to carry it forward. That's how the wound heals. That's how the crying stops. He has to go back to the beginning and see it with his own eyes. Only then will the door open to his home. I closed the journal. I didn't want to go to 1864. I didn't want to see the soldiers, the forced march, the death and suffering. I knew the history, I'd learned it in school, and from my grandmother's stories wasn't that enough? But I knew it wasn't. Knowing wasn't the same as witnessing. Reading about trauma wasn't the same as standing in it. The chapter house had been moving me backward, 1988 to 1934 to 1962 to 1978. That wasn't a straight line, but it was circling, spiraling toward the center, toward 1864, toward the wound that had started everything. I stood up and walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "I'm ready. Take me back." I opened the door and I stepped into hell. The first thing I saw was smoke. The second thing I heard was screaming. The third thing I smelled was blood. I was standing outside the chapter house, but the chapter house was different now. Older, rougher, barely more than a wooden shelter, and all around it, chaos. Hundreds of Navajo people were being herded into a makeshift camp by soldiers on horseback. Families clutched their children and their belongings, what little they'd been allowed to bring. Old people stumbled and fell and were kicked back to their feet. Animals cried out as they were slaughtered, the sheep and horses that couldn't make the journey. This was the gathering before the long walk. This was where my ancestors had been collected like cattle, before being marched 300 miles to a concentration camp in New Mexico, and I was standing in the middle of it, wearing a police uniform, carrying a badge and a gun. A soldier spotted me and rode over, his rifle pointed at my chest. "You there! Identify yourself." I raised my hand slowly, my mind racing. "My name is Marcus Zoe. I stopped. "I'm a what? A police officer? That wouldn't mean anything to him, a Navajo? Then I'd be thrown in with the others, marched to Bosque Redondo, probably killed along the way." "I'm a translator," I said, "sent from Fort Defiance to help with the relocation." The soldier studied me suspiciously. "You don't look like any translator I've seen. And that uniform, I've been working with the Navajo for years. I dress like them to gain their trust." The lies came easier than I expected. "I can help you communicate, make the process smoother." The soldier lowered his rifle slightly. "We could use a translator. These savages don't understand a word we say." I bit back my response and nodded. "Show me where I can help." He led me into the camp, and I walked among my people in their darkest hour. I saw the fear in their eyes, the confusion, the despair. Children crying for parents who'd been separated from them. Elders sitting in the dirt, too weak to stand, waiting to be left behind to die. And I couldn't save them. I couldn't change history, couldn't stop the long walk, couldn't prevent the 300 deaths along the route or the thousands more at Bosque Redondo. All I could do was witness. Howard Yazzie had been right. This was what the chapter house demanded. Not a hero to rewrite history, but a witness to remember it. I spent 7 days in 1864. 7 days of horror, of suffering, of watching my people lose everything. I helped where I could, translating orders so families could stay together, sneaking food to the sick and elderly, carrying children who couldn't walk. On the 7th day, I went back to the chapter house. It was still there, that rough wooden shelter. Now, standing at the edge of the emptied camp, everyone was gone, marched east toward Bosque Redondo. The land was silent. I walked inside, and I finally understood what I had to do. The chapter house had shown me the full arc of Navajo suffering the long walk. The livestock reduction, the uranium poisoning, the sovereignty struggles. Wounds upon wounds, trauma echoing through generations. But it had also shown me survival, council meetings in 1934, resistance in 1962, activism in 1978. My people fighting back, adapting, enduring. The wound was deep, but it wasn't fatal. I pulled out Howard's journal and a pencil, and I started to write. I wrote down everything I'd seen, everything I'd learned. I wrote warnings for 1934 about the livestock reduction. I wrote warnings for 1962 about the uranium mines. I wrote encouragement for 1978, telling them the struggle was worth it. And I drew a picture, a man in a police uniform, standing in front of a vehicle from the future. The officer from the timeline, the witness, the legend. I left the journal in the chapter house, knowing that Howard Yazzie would find it in 1932, 2 years before our first meeting, knowing that my words would travel backward in time, giving my people the knowledge to prepare, to survive, to endure. The loop was complete. I walked to the door of the chapter house and opened it. On the other side was 1988, my patrol unit, sitting in the parking lot, the sun setting over Monument Valley home. But as I stepped through, I heard Howard Yazzie's voice one last time, echoing from somewhere in the folds of time. "You've witnessed the wound, Officer So. You've closed the loop. But you haven't finished the story. The chapter house has one more thing to show you. The cost of what you've done." The door closed behind me. And when I looked at my patrol unit, I saw that it was different. Newer model, different number on the door. And when I looked at my hands, I saw they were older, wrinkled, spotted with age. I wasn't in 1988, I was somewhere else, somewhen else, and I had no idea how to get back to my family. I stood in the parking lot, staring at my hands. They were my hands, the same scars, the same shape, but decades older. The skin was thin and spotted, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. I was an old man. The patrol unit in front of me confirmed it. The design was different, more modern, with equipment I didn't recognize. The unit number was different too, and when I looked at the badge on my chest, it wasn't my badge. The name tag said Bigay. The badge number was wrong. Everything was wrong. But I was still wearing a Navajo tribal police uniform. Still standing outside the chapter house in Monument Valley. Still a cop. I walked to the patrol unit and looked at myself in the side mirror. The face staring back was mine, but old. 70, maybe older. White hair, deep wrinkles, eyes that had seen too much. How long had I been gone? What had happened to Ellen, to my children, to my life? The radio in the unit crackled. "Unit 12, what's your status?" I reached through the window and grabbed the handset, my old hands fumbling with the unfamiliar equipment. This is Unit 12. I need a time check. Time is 1847 hours. You okay out there, Marcus? You sound strange. Marcus, they knew my name, but the badge said Bigay. "I'm fine, just need a minute." I released the handset and tried to think. The chapter house had moved me again, but not to another historical era. It had moved me forward, into my own future. A future where I was still a tribal police officer, still patrolling Monument Valley. But decades older, the chapter house door opened behind me, and a young woman stepped out. She was wearing a tribal police uniform, her badge gleaming in the sunset light. She looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. "Officer Tso, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. What year is it?" She frowned. "It's 2024, sir. Are you feeling okay? Do you need me to call someone?" 36 years in the future, I'd jumped from 1864 to 2024 in a single step. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just disoriented." The chapter house does that sometimes. The young woman nodded, her expression shifting to understanding. "So, it's true. You're the one. The officer who walks through time. I thought it was just a legend." "What legend?" "Officer Marcus Tso, the temporal witness. They say you visited every era of Navajo history, from the Long Walk to the present day. They say you left messages for our ancestors, warnings that helped us survive." She studied my face. "I'm Officer Naomi Begay. I've been assigned to this patrol route for 2 years. The elders told me I might meet you someday, but I didn't believe them." The badge, the name tag. This was her patrol unit, not mine. I was just a passenger in this timeline, an old man wearing the wrong uniform. "Naomi, I need to understand what's happening. In my timeline, it's 1988. I have a wife, 2 children. I've been moving through the chapter house for what feels like a few weeks, but here, it's 2024. How is that possible?" Naomi led me to a bench outside the chapter house and sat down beside me. "The elders say time works differently for you. You've been appearing throughout Navajo history for over a century, but you've never aged the way you should. They say the chapter house keeps you preserved, moving you through the timeline to witness what needs to be witnessed. But I have aged. Look at me. You've aged in here," she said, tapping her chest. "In your heart, in your spirit. The body is just catching up." She paused. "The elders also say there's a cost, that the chapter house takes something from everyone who passes through. Time, memory, connections, the things that tie us to our own lives. Ellen, my children. I could barely remember their faces now. The years I'd spent in other eras had blurred my memories, worn them down like rocks in a stream. How do I get back? To 1988, to my family? I don't know. No one does. But the elders might have answers. There's a gathering tonight at the chapter house people who've studied the temporal wound, who've dedicated their lives to understanding it. They've been waiting for you." That night, I sat in the chapter house with a circle of elders, historians, and medicine people. Some were old enough to remember the stories their grandparents had told about me. Others had spent decades researching the phenomenon, collecting accounts from every era I'd visited. A woman named Dr. Clara Nez, a physics professor from Diné College, explained their current understanding. The chapter house sits on a convergence of temporal fractures, created by the concentrated trauma of the Long Walk. When you first entered in 1988, you became entangled with these fractures. Your consciousness now exists in a state of quantum superposition, present in multiple eras simultaneously. "That's not an explanation," I said. "That's just words. You're right, we don't fully understand it. But we know this. The chapter house serves a purpose. It creates witnesses, people who can see the full scope of Navajo history, who can carry that knowledge across time. You've done that. You've been to 1864, to 1934, to 1962, to 1978. You've seen our suffering and our survival. So why am I here? In 2024? What's left to witness?" Dr. Nez exchanged glances with the elders. "The cost. Howard Yazzie wrote about it in his journal, but we didn't understand until now. The chapter house doesn't just show you history. It takes you out of your own timeline. The more you witness, the less you belong to any single era. Your wife, your children, your life in 1988, they've continued without you. They've lived their whole lives while you've been walking through time. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you go back to 1988 now, it won't be your 1988. Too much has changed. Too much time has passed for you and for them. You'll be a stranger in your own life. Then what am I supposed to do? Just stay here? Accept that I've lost everything? An elder named Thomas Blackwater spoke up. He was well over 90, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes still sharp. You haven't lost everything, son. You've gained something too. You've become a part of our story, our history. Every Navajo child learns about Officer Tso, the witness who walks through time. You're a symbol of endurance, of memory, of the importance of never forgetting where we came from. I don't want to be a symbol, I want to be a husband, a father. I know, and I'm sorry. But the chapter house doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what's needed. I sat with that for a long time, the weight of it crushing 36 years. Ellen would be in her 70s now if she was still alive. My children would be grown, with children of their own. They'd lived entire lives without me, and I'd missed all of it. Naomi drove me to Kayenta the next morning. My old house was still there, but different. New additions, new paint, a garden where there used to be bare dirt, a child's bicycle in the yard. I stood across the street, watching. An old woman came out onto the porch, moving slowly with a cane. Ellen, my Ellen, but old now, white-haired and fragile. She looked up and saw me standing there. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the distance of 36 years. Then she smiled, a sad smile, but real. She knew me. Even after all this time, she knew me. I crossed the street and walked up to the porch. We stood there, face to face, two old people who used to be young together. "Marcus," she said, "you came back. I'm sorry it took so long. The chapter house doesn't apologize for what it does. Neither should you." She reached out and touched my face, her fingers tracing the lines of age. "The children grew up wondering about you." I told them the stories, the legend. They didn't always believe me, but they never forgot you. Are they here? Daniel lives in Phoenix. He's a lawyer, works on water rights cases for the nation. Sarah is in Window Rock, teaches at the high school. They have children of their own, your grandchildren. Grandchildren. I had grandchildren I'd never met, born while I was walking through centuries of trauma. I don't know how to come back to this, I admitted. I don't know how to be part of a life that went on without me. Ellen took my hand. "You don't come back to it. You start from here. We're old, Marcus. We don't have much time left, but we have some. Let's use it." I stayed with Ellen for a week. I met Daniel and Sarah, awkward reunions with middle-aged strangers who had my eyes and Ellen's smile. I met my grandchildren who looked at me with curiosity and confusion, trying to reconcile the legend with the tired old man in front of them. It was good. It was painful. It was not enough, but it was something. On the 7th night, I felt the pull again. That shift in the air, that change in pressure, the chapter house was calling me back. "I have to go," I told Ellen. "I know. I've always known." She kissed me, gentle and sad. "Will you come back?" I don't know how any of this works." "Then I'll do what I've always done. I'll wait and I'll hope." I drove to the chapter house alone. Naomi was there, waiting. "It's time," she asked. "It's time. Where will it take you?" "I don't know. Maybe back to 1988, maybe somewhere else. The chapter house does what it wants. I walked to the door and stopped. There was something I needed to do first. I pulled out Howard Yazzi's journal, now worn and battered from my travels through time. I'd carried it through 1864, through 1978, through 2024. It had been my guide, my companion. I handed it to Naomi. Keep this safe. Make sure the stories get told. Make sure people remember what happened here, in all the eras, the long walk, the uranium, the sovereignty struggles, all of it. I will. She held the journal carefully, reverently. What about you? What will you do? Finish it. Close the loop once and for all. The chapter house showed me the wound. Now I have to see if it's healed. I opened the door. This time, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no people, no 2024 or 1988 or any other era I recognized. Just red sand, red rocks, and the chapter house standing alone under an empty sky. I stepped through and closed the door behind me, and I heard a voice, Howard Yazzi's voice, coming from everywhere and nowhere. You've seen the history, Officer So. You've witnessed the trauma. Now comes the final question. Was it worth it? All the pain, all the loss, all the suffering across generations. Did we endure for a reason? Or is survival its own meaning? I didn't have an answer. I'd seen the horrors of the long walk, the slow death of the uranium miners, the struggles for sovereignty and self-determination. I'd seen my people beaten down again and again, but I'd also seen them get back up, build new lives on the ruins of the old, fight for their rights, their culture, their future, survive. It's worth it, I said to the empty air. It's always worth it, because the alternative is disappearing, and we're still here. We're still Navajo. The chapter house began to shake. The walls flickered, showing glimpses of every era I'd visited. 1864, 1934, 1962, 1978, 2024, all of them existing simultaneously layered on top of each other. And then, slowly, they began to separate, to settle, to become distinct again, each era returning to its proper place in time. The wound was closing. Howard's voice came one last time. You've done what was needed, Marcus. You've witnessed and remembered and passed the stories on. The chapter house is satisfied, the loop is complete. What happens now? Where do I go? Where do you want to go? I thought about 1988, about the life I'd left behind. But that life was gone now, lived out by Ellen and my children without me. I thought about 2024, about the week I'd spent with my aged wife and grown children. There was still time there, a little bit. Time to know my grandchildren, to be part of the story's end. 2024, I said. I want to go back to Ellen. Then go. The door of the chapter house opened, and I saw the parking lot in the golden light of a 2024 sunset. Naomi's patrol unit was there, and Ellen was standing beside it, waiting for me. Waiting like she'd always waited. I walked through the door. Behind me, the chapter house shimmered once and then went still. The temporal wound had closed. The loop was complete. The crying had stopped, but the stories would go on. In the journals I'd left behind, in the warnings I'd given, in the legend of Officer Marcus So who walked through time, I took Ellen's hand, and we drove away from the chapter house together. We had a little time left, and we were going to use it. Ellen and I had 3 years together. 3 years of quiet mornings and long conversations, of meeting grandchildren and attending family gatherings, of watching the sun set over Monument Valley from the porch of our home. 3 years to make up for 36 lost ones. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was what we had, and we were grateful for every day. The first year was the hardest. I had to learn how to be a husband again, how to be a father to grown children who'd lived their entire adult lives without me. Daniel was cautious at first, polite but distant. He'd been 12 when I disappeared, old enough to remember me but young enough that the memories had faded. Sarah was warmer, more willing to forgive, but I could see the questions in her eyes. Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back sooner? Why did you choose the chapter house over us? I didn't have answers that would satisfy them. How do you explain that you didn't choose to leave, that time itself had swallowed you? How do you apologize for missing birthdays, graduations, weddings, the birth of grandchildren? Some wounds don't heal with words. They only heal with presence, with showing up day after day, with proving that you're not going to disappear again. The grandchildren were easier. They hadn't known me before, so they had no expectations to disappoint. To them, I was just Grandpa Marcus, the old man with the strange stories who always had candy in his pockets and time to listen to their problems. I taught them how to track animals in the desert, how to read the weather by watching the clouds, how to find their way home by the stars. The things my grandmother had taught me passed down to another generation. Ellen and I didn't talk much about the lost years. We'd said what needed to be said in those first few days after my return, and after that, we focused on the present. She'd built a good life without me, a full life with friends and activities and purpose. I tried to fit into that life without disrupting it too much. Some days it worked. Some days I felt like a ghost in my own home, a visitor from another time who didn't quite belong. But we had each other. After everything, after 36 years apart, we still had each other. And that was more than I'd dared to hope for during all those years walking through time Ellen passed in the spring of 2027, peacefully, in her sleep. I was beside her, holding her hand, when she took her last breath. The doctors said it was her heart, that it had simply worn out after 84 years. I think it was more than that. I think she'd been holding on, waiting for me to come back, and once I did, once she knew I was home for good, she finally let herself rest. The funeral was held at the chapter house in Kayenta, the real one, the one that existed in normal time. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Ellen had touched many lives in her years on the reservation, and they all wanted to honor her memory. I stood at the front, accepting condolences, shaking hands. Trying to hold myself together, Daniel spoke at the service. He talked about his mother's strength, her resilience, her unwavering faith that I would come back someday. He talked about the years she'd spent alone, raising 2 children, building a career as a teacher, never giving up hope. When he finished, he looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding, acceptance. She never stopped loving you, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Every night, she'd look out the window toward Monument Valley and say goodnight to you. Even when everyone else thought you were dead, she knew you were still out there. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. After the funeral, after the guests had gone and the food had been put away, I sat alone on the porch of our house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the same colors I'd seen 1,000 times from this same spot. But now the chair beside me was empty. I was 83 years old. I'd walked through time, witnessed generations of my people's history, carried the weight of trauma and survival in my bones. I was tired, more tired than I'd ever been. I was ready to join Ellen, ready to rest. But the chapter house had other plans. 3 days after the funeral, I felt it. That shift in the air, that familiar tug in my chest. I was sitting on the porch, watching the stars come out one by one, and suddenly I knew the loop wasn't complete after all. There was one more thing left to do. I tried to ignore it. I'd given enough to the chapter house, sacrificed enough I wanted to stay here in this time, and live out whatever days I had left in peace, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It got stronger each night, a pull that I couldn't resist. On the 7th night, I got in my truck and drove to Monument Valley. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Daniel and Sarah had their own lives, their own families. They didn't need to worry about their old father chasing ghosts in the desert. The chapter house was there, waiting. It always was. The building stood in the moonlight, solid and patient, the same cinder block structure I'd first seen in 1988, 39 years ago, from my perspective. A lifetime. The door was open. I walked inside and found a young man waiting for me. He was in his late 20s, wearing a brand new Navajo tribal police uniform, the creases still sharp. His name tag said Yazzie. "Officer Zoe," he said. "My name is Samuel Yazzie. I'm Howard's great-great-grandson." I studied his face, looking for traces of the old man I'd met in 1934. The eyes were the same. Sharp, intelligent, seeing more than they let on. I figured there was a connection. Howard's family has always been tied to this place. We've been the keepers of the story, the journals, the research, the theories. Everything Howard learned about the chapter house, we've preserved and added to. 4 generations of Yazzies trying to understand what you experienced. He paused, and trying to figure out how to end it. End it? I thought I already did. I closed the loop, witnessed the history, passed on the warnings. You closed your loop, but the chapter house is still here, still existing outside of normal time. Still waiting for the next person to wander in and get lost. Samuel's expression was serious. Last year, a hiker from Colorado stumbled into the chapter house and ended up in 1952. We got him out, but it took 3 weeks. The year before that, a geology student spent 6 months bouncing between 1941 and 1979. She still has nightmares. So it's still happening. People are still getting trapped. As long as the chapter house exists, it will keep happening. The temporal wound is healed, but the scar remains, and that scar is a doorway. I sat down in one of the folding chairs, feeling the weight of this news. I'd thought my work was done. I'd thought I could finally rest. What do you want me to do? Destroy it? I'm not sure that's possible, and even if it were, should we? The chapter house serves a purpose. It keeps the memory alive. We don't want to destroy it. We want to protect it, and protect the people who might wander into it by accident. Samuel sat down across from me. The chapter house needs a guardian, someone who can watch over it, guide people out when they get lost, keep the balance between remembering and moving forward. A guardian, someone who exists outside of time, someone who's already made the journey, paid the price, understands how it works. He looked at me steadily. Someone like you. I let out a long breath. You're asking me to give up whatever time I have left, to become part of the chapter house permanently. I'm asking you to consider it. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. I thought about Ellen, waiting for me somewhere beyond this life. I thought about Daniel and Sarah, finally starting to see me as their father again. I thought about my grandchildren, who were just getting to know me. But I also thought about all the people who might stumble into the chapter house in the years to come. Hikers, tourists, researchers, lost travelers. People who didn't know what they were walking into, who could lose years or decades the way I had. People who might not find their way back at all. I'd spent my whole career protecting people, first in Vietnam, then as a tribal police officer. It was who I was, what I was meant to do, and now I was being asked to do it one more time, in a way that would last forever. If I agree to this, I said slowly, what happens to me? Do I die? Do I become a ghost? We don't know exactly. The journals don't say. But the people who've encountered the chapter house over the years, they all describe feeling a presence inside, something watching over them, keeping them safe. We think that presence is you, or will be you. That doesn't make sense. How can I already be there if I haven't agreed yet? Samuel smiled. Time doesn't work the same way in the chapter house. You know that better than anyone. If you choose to become the guardian, you'll exist in all eras simultaneously, past, present, future. You'll always have been there even before you made the choice. I rubbed my temples, trying to wrap my head around the paradox. I'd experienced enough temporal strangeness to know that Samuel was right, but it still made my brain hurt. What about Ellen? Will I see her again? I don't know. Maybe your consciousness will expand beyond this world entirely. Maybe you'll find her waiting for you on the other side of time. Or maybe, he hesitated. Maybe the chapter house is the other side. Maybe being the guardian is its own kind of afterlife. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit desert. Monument Valley spread out before me, the same landscape I'd known my entire life. The same buttes and mesas that my ancestors had walked among for centuries. This was home. This land, this people, this history. It was worth protecting. It had always been worth protecting. Okay, I said. Show me what I need to do. Samuel led me to the center of the chapter house, to the exact spot where the temporal fractures converged. I could feel them, now that I knew what to look for. Thin places in reality, where different eras pressed up against each other like pages in a book. You need to anchor yourself to this spot, Samuel explained. Open yourself up to all the eras at once. Let your consciousness expand to fill the entire chapter house in all its iterations across time. How do I do that? The same way you did everything else in this place, you let go. Stop holding on to a single moment, a single timeline. Accept all of them as equally real. I closed my eyes and tried to relax. It was hard. My whole life I'd been taught to focus, to concentrate, to be present in the moment. Now I was being asked to do the opposite. I thought about 1864, about the long walk. I let myself feel it, the fear and the suffering, the determination to survive. I thought about 1934, about Howard Yazzie and the Council, their dignity in the face of oppression. I thought about 1962, about the uranium miners slowly poisoning themselves to feed their families. I thought about 1978, about the young activists fighting for sovereignty, for self-determination. I thought about 2024, about Ellen's smile when she saw me again after 36 years. I let all of it exist at once. All the pain, all the hope, all the struggle, all the survival I stopped trying to be in one time and let myself be in all of them. And then I felt it, the expansion. My consciousness spreading out like water, filling every corner of the chapter house, seeping into every era. I could see the council meetings in 1934, the miners in 1962, the activists in 1978. I could see the soldiers in 1864, gathering my people for the long walk. I could see Ellen and my children in 2024, living their lives, missing me, moving forward. I could see all of it, all at once, forever. It should have been overwhelming. It should have driven me insane, but instead it felt peaceful. Like coming home after a long journey. Like finally understanding my purpose, I opened my eyes, and I was everywhere. Samuel was standing in front of me, but I could also see him as a child, as a teenager, as an old man, all the versions of him that existed in the chapter house's timeline, all present simultaneously. "It's done," I said, and my voice echoed strangely, coming from multiple eras at once. "I can feel them all. Every time period, every person who's ever entered this place. Can you guide them? If someone gets lost, can you show them the way out?" I reached out with my new awareness and felt the boundaries of the chapter house, the places where it connected to normal time. I could see the doors, dozens of them, each one leading to a different era. And I could see how to open them, how to guide someone through. Yes, I can do it. Samuel nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Officer So, for everything you've done, for everything you're doing now. Take care of the journals. Keep telling the stories. Make sure people remember why this place exists. I will. My family always has." I watched as Samuel walked to the door and stepped out into 2027. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in the chapter house. Alone and yet surrounded by all the people who had ever entered this place. In all the eras it had touched, I settled into my new existence. It took time to adjust, to learn how to be everywhere at once without losing myself. But gradually, I found a rhythm. I watched over the chapter house, felt the temporal fractures, monitored the doors. When someone entered, I was there, a presence in the shadows, ready to guide them out before they got lost. Years passed. Or maybe they didn't. Time was different now, meaningless in the old way. I existed in 1864 and 1934 and 1962 and 1978 and 2024. And all the years between and beyond, I saw my people's history unfold, not as a sequence of events, but as a single tapestry, all the threads woven together. I saw the long walk and the return from Bosque Redondo. I saw the livestock reduction and the slow rebuilding afterward. I saw the uranium mines open and close, saw the sickness spread through the workers, saw the long fight for compensation and justice. I saw the sovereignty movement rise, saw the nation take control of its own destiny, saw the language and culture survive against all odds. I saw it all, and I remembered it all, and I made sure no one else would forget. The legend of Officer Marcus Zoe continued to grow. People who entered the chapter house reported feeling a presence, a guiding hand that showed them the way out. They described hearing a voice, calm and reassuring, telling them not to be afraid. Some said they saw a figure in an old tribal police uniform, watching over them from the shadows. The stories spread across the reservation, from family to family, chapter to chapter. Officer So, the Time Walker. Officer So, the Witness. Officer So, the Guardian. I became part of the mythology, a spirit that protected anyone who wandered into the wounded places of time. I didn't mind. I'd always wanted to protect my people. Now I could do it forever. The young officer walked into the chapter house on a quiet Tuesday evening in 2031. She was responding to a call about a strange building that had appeared on a back road near Monument Valley, a building that wasn't on any map. Her name was Rebecca Sosi, and she'd been on the tribal police force for 3 years. She'd heard the stories about Officer Marcus Zoe. Of course, every Navajo cop had. But she didn't really believe them. They were just legends, the kind of thing old-timers told around campfires to spook the rookies. The building looked normal enough from outside. Single-story, cinder-block construction, flat roof. A typical chapter house except for the fact that it shouldn't exist. She called in her location and stepped through the door. Inside, the meeting room was dark and empty. Folding chairs stacked against the wall, a table at the front, a calendar on the wall. She shone her flashlight on the calendar and felt her stomach drop. It said 1988. That was wrong. That was very, very wrong. She turned to leave, but the door was gone. just a blank wall where the entrance had been. Rebecca's heart started pounding. She'd heard the stories, but she'd never believed them. Now she was living them. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty room. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Then, from somewhere in the building, a sound. Footsteps, soft and measured. Coming closer, Rebecca drew her weapon, backing against the wall. The footsteps stopped just outside the meeting room door. "Who's there? Identify yourself." And then she felt it. A presence, warm and reassuring, filling the room. A voice speaking directly into her mind, calm and gentle. "Don't be afraid, Officer Tsosi. You're not trapped. You just took a wrong turn. I'm here to show you the way out." She spun around, trying to find the source of the voice. But there was no one there, just shadows and silence. "Who are you? Where are you?" "I'm the guardian of this place. I've been watching over it for a long time, longer than you can imagine." A figure began to materialize in the corner of the room. An old man in a tribal police uniform, the style from decades ago. His face was weathered, kind, with eyes that held a deep sadness and a deeper peace. "Officer So," Rebecca whispered. "That's right. I'm going to help you get home. But first, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Rebecca holstered her weapon and nodded slowly. Yes, I can do that." "Good, follow me." He led her through the chapter house, through rooms that shifted and changed as they walked. She caught glimpses of other eras, other times. A council meeting in what looked like the 1930s. Men in work clothes from the 1960s, their faces tired and sick. Young people with red headbands, raising their fists in protest. "What is this place?" she asked. "It's a wound in time, a place where the past and the present and the future all exist together. It was created by trauma, by the suffering of our people. But it's also a place of memory, of preservation. As long as it exists, we'll never forget where we came from. And you guard it? Forever? Forever is just a word. I exist in all times at once. I see everything that's ever happened in this place, and everything that ever will happen, including this moment, right now, with you." They reached a door that hadn't been there before. Through it, Rebecca could see the parking lot, her patrol unit, the normal night sky of 2031. "There's your way home," Officer So said. "Go through and don't look back. The chapter house will try to pull you in again, but as long as you keep moving forward, you'll be fine." Rebecca stepped toward this door, then hesitated. "Why do you do this? Why did you give up your life to guard this place?" Officer So smiled, and in that smile she saw all the years he'd lived, all the history he'd witnessed, all the people he'd protected. Because someone had to. Because our stories matter. Because as long as one person remembers, we're never truly gone. He gestured toward the door. "Now go. Your family is waiting for you. Don't make them wait any longer than they have to." Rebecca stepped through the door and out into the cool night air. She took a deep breath, feeling the solid ground beneath her feet, the normal flow of time around her. She turned to thank Officer So, but the door was gone. The chapter house stood silent and dark, just another building in the desert. But she knew better now. She knew what was inside, what was watching over it, what would always be watching over it. She got in her patrol unit and drove back to the station. She didn't tell anyone what she'd seen. Some things were too strange to explain, too sacred to share. But from that day on, she believed the legends. She knew Officer Marcus So was real, and that he was still out there, still protecting his people, still walking through time. And sometimes on quiet nights when she drove past the place where the chapter house appeared, She'd catch a glimpse of it in her rearview mirror. Just for a moment. Just at the edge of sight. A building that wasn't on any map. A door that opened to all of history. A guardian who kept watch over the wounded places, making sure no one else got lost. The legend would continue to grow in the years that followed. More officers would report encounters with the chapter house. More stories would be told at family gatherings and chapter meetings. Officer Marcus Tso became part of Navajo mythology, a protector spirit like the hero twins, a figure of wisdom like Changing Woman. Some said he was a ghost. Some said he was an ancestor spirit. Some said he was just a story, a symbol, a way of teaching children about the importance of memory and sacrifice, but Rebecca Tsosi knew the truth. She'd seen him with her own eyes, felt his presence in that dark room, heard his voice guiding her home. He was real. He was watching. He would always be watching. In the chapter house, in all the chapter houses across all the eras, I watch and I wait. I see my people in 1864, beginning the long walk. I see the soldiers on horseback, the families clutching their children, the elders too weak to survive the journey. I see the strength it took to endure, to hold on to hope when hope seemed impossible. I see them in 1934, facing the livestock reduction. I see Howard Yazzie and the council trying to protect their community from another wave of destruction. I see the sheep being slaughtered, the way of life being dismantled, the determination to rebuild once again. I see them in 1962, working the uranium mines. I see the yellow ore, the dust in their lungs, the slow death that awaited them. I see Annie Benally and the other nurses documenting the sickness, fighting for recognition and justice. I see them in 1978, demanding sovereignty. I see the young activists and the traditional elders arguing about tactics, but united in purpose. I see the nation taking control of its own destiny, step by painful step. I see them in 2024 and 2031 and all the years beyond. I see my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren living their lives on the land our ancestors fought to keep. I see Navajo doctors and lawyers and teachers and artists carrying our culture into the future. I see Ellen, young and beautiful, waiting for me to come home from patrol. I see her in all the years I missed, raising our children, building her career, never losing faith that I would return. I see her in our final years together, the joy and the sorrow, the love that never faded. I see all of it, all the time, forever. And I am at peace, because the story didn't end with me. It continued like it always does. Generation after generation, trauma after trauma, survival after survival, the wound heals, but the scar remains. And the scar is what makes us who we are. I am Officer Marcus Tso. I walked through time. I witnessed the history of my people. From the darkest moments to the brightest hopes, I carried their stories across the years, made sure they would never be forgotten. And now I guard the place where time is broken, the wounded place, the chapter house that exists in all eras at once. I watch over anyone who enters, guide them safely home, make sure no one else has to sacrifice what I sacrificed. This is my purpose, this is my peace, this is my story, but it's also our story. The story of the Navajo Nation, of everything we've endured and everything we've overcome. The story of survival, of resilience, of a people who refused to disappear. And as long as the chapter house stands, as long as I stand with it, that story will never be forgotten. We will always remember. We will always endure. We will always be here. Ahehi. Thank you.